let's see if I can record the session. So hello, everybody. Happy to have you on board for another episode of Caribbean Rum Chronicles. And I have the usual suspects with me. We're hoping to have the Chef de Four join us in a little while when he figures out the connection. There he is. I've just found him. So there you go. Welcome.
What's happening? What's happening?
Welcome. So I think before we start today's show, I would like to just have a brief moment's silence in respect for George Floyd and the others that have experienced injustices for their situation and where they are that we all have been pretty much against. So just a moment's silence, please. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. So, episode 3 of the Caribbean Rum Chronicles. Today, as you know, we are cooking with rum, if you're not aware. I hope everybody likes their food. It was somewhat of a small challenge to do today's session because I wanted to give you such a variety. I'm surprised at the level of, or the lack of level of information that was readily available. And thank goodness we have a chef on board today who will offer some of his expertise. And I mean, let me just tell you quickly, with the usual suspects, an introduction. We have the Rum Doctor. He may appear on your screen as Kmatic, but his name is Kelvin.
Yes, sir.
He is a man of many Caribbean islands, and he is very into
a special fried rice.
A special fried rice indeed, and he is very much into macerating and infusing fruits and spices into rum. I will just let you know that I may have to dash to the cooker, but I'm not too far away from it because I am making one of the recipes as we speak.
Lovely.
So I just have to double check on it at the odd occasions, but you guys can keep the crowd entertained. My second guest that I want you to, and he's a regular, not just a guest, he's actually another co-host, is Emanuel Ferris-Hue, who claims to know how to make drinks. He is a bar manager of repute. He has been around the block many times. I'm sure I can say that. And his expertise is quite valuable to us. Another man of Caribbean background between Antigua and Jamaica, and spent time in Barbados. And you'll hear me referring to him as Manny. And he actually currently is one of the managers at Lucky Cane, a rum bar in Islington. So there you go. Third, another co-host, which is Lisette Davis, who is the only one that is sitting in beautiful climate because she is in Grenada, and she actually runs a guest house called the Rumboat Retreat. And if you're in Grenada, there's no point staying anywhere else. Rumboat Retreat not only offers fabulous hospitality, beautiful rooms, and there's only 4 rooms unless you've added more recently, Lisette.
No, not yet.
Right, there's 4 rooms, but those 4 rooms are amazing, and in the lounge area of those 4 rooms is a very well-stocked rum bar, and Lisette goes around Grenada teaching people about rum also. So thank you very much for joining us. And Chef de Four, you will hear me refer to him as Hassan. Hassan has very, or chef, whichever. He's a man of Trinidad reputation and born and bred in Trinidad, as he reminded me. He's known as a Caribbean culinary ambassador, and has 2 restaurants that you can visit. One is in Singapore, so get out to Singapore, called the Limehouse, and then one in Oxford called Spice Roots, which is an award-winning restaurant for Caribbean cuisine and best restaurant in Oxford. So he must be doing something right there, or else I don't know if he's paying money to the judges to give him these awards. So I want you to quickly say hi to everybody while I just double check the pot. One is in Singapore, so get out to Singapore called the Limehouse, and then one in Oxford called Spice.
My bad, that was me.
We got a double feed.
Are you showing?
Are you showing?
That was me. Sorry.
Anyway, I should also say welcome to another guest and hopefully a permanent partner and guest in our broadcast today, which is Zavy. So you can now tune in through zavy.co and watch our live feeds through Zavy. And if you're already a member of Zavy, please, and a regular of Zavy, welcome. We're glad to have you and to share our experiences and our knowledge. But today's Cooking with Rum. We've had, as I said, it's episode 3. The past, we've more or less been talking about how we drink rum in the Caribbean. Today, we're going to talk about how we cook with rum. So it's a bit of a culinary treat today. And rum does have, surprisingly enough, has a steep history with cooking. And even one of the recipes which we're going to talk about today, actually, I put it on the list because technically it is not from the Caribbean, although many people think that Bermuda is in the Caribbean, but it is not a Caribbean island, but it's close enough. So we'll allow them the recipe today, and it is a fish chowder that dates back to the 17th century. So that gives you an idea of how long people have been cooking with rum. And when you do a lot of research, you may find that there's not as many savory recipes as you would like to find, but you will find a lot of dessert recipes, baking recipes, such as cakes, even ice cream. Everybody knows of rum and raisin ice cream. Does anybody remember eating rum and raisin ice cream in the Caribbean? And I want to ask a question. I'm sure it did have real rum in it, didn't it? It's not like the ones we have today.
No, it's the rum was very, very like you could taste the strength of the rum in it.
I mean,
from my experience then in growing up in Curacao, so
yeah, I mean,
what they used to do with the raisins is that they would soak them in the rum. So
right,
to add that extra flavor when you bite into the raisins, it would even more flavor, more rum.
Exactly.
And that would technically be illegal in the Western world, wouldn't it? Because obviously, majority of people who eat ice cream are children. So I don't think that you'd have to use some sort of rum flavoring. Would that be right, Chef?
Yes, if you wanted for that underage market, but I think it's something that adults will enjoy. So the kids can have the chocolate chips, and that's
right.
Can have.
Right. So, and to add to that, I mean, we have seen a number of modern day chefs that have seen the benefits of cooking with rum. I mean, some of the recipes today, you can see this one. This one is a book by Paul Yellin, a Barbados chef called Infusion. And he did some recipes, a number of recipes working with Mount Gay. And I have another one here from Janie. Oh my goodness, can't pronounce her name fully. It's so let me just Janie Colney Johnson, and this was a book called Table Manners. Quite a large book. It's very much a coffee table book, but this talks about chefs and the recipes in Antigua. That we will discuss a couple of recipes from both of these books a bit later on today. So there are a number of modern day chefs that use rums. And we will not only discuss some of the recipes and show you some of these recipes, but we will also talk about the rums in these recipes and what those rums possibly bring to the table for these recipes as well. And, generally, a lot of references talk about using quite often dark or spiced rums in the flavoring of food. But that doesn't preclude the fact that you also will note that many will use white rums, which are commonly used in fish and seafood and maybe white meat dishes like chicken. People use aged and dark rums with red meats and barbecue and so forth. And the dark and more darker spiced rums give a distinct flavor and a characteristic. So I think, does anybody want to comment on what they think is a preference for those style of rums in cooking?
Well, I think the aged rums have a natural partnership with sweet foods, don't they? So if you're making barbecue sauces or things like that, an aged rum is going to pair really well. But light rums, I guess, if you're cooking something fresher, maybe some can pair with fish, things like that of that nature. I mean,
yeah, because aged rums lend a very caramel notes to dishes.
Right.
The dark rums definitely are an enhancer to the chocolate flavor in chocolate. So if you are making, for example, a chocolate mousse or something, you add a little bit of dark rum, it really lifts the flavor of the chocolate that's in it.
Right. Okay. So as we move on and we talk about rums and the first recipe, let's have a look at a couple of appetizers, and both of them are soups. First one is the one I mentioned earlier. This is a recipe, the 17th century recipe. I'm not sure if it's the exact recipe from the 17th century, but I suspect that this probably is the recipe that's been modified by Gosling's Black Seal, which is a rum which is blended in Bermuda. I believe, from what I understand, what Gosling's Black Seal does is that they will buy a number of different rums across the Caribbean, and they'll do the blend themselves. This one here is quite an interesting little recipe, and quite a bit of complexity, because it's quite interesting when we talk, and I'll refer this to Chef before. When Europeans look at cooking, and we talk about the French and the Italians, who are very renowned for their culinary skills, they use very little spices. They actually use less spices and always talk about allowing the flavor of the food to develop. Now, in the Caribbean and in the Far East, when we talk about Indian and Chinese and Caribbean cooking, where we inherited a lot of spices from the Far East, we use a lot more spices. This one here in particular has a number of spices. What's the benefit of having a bigger selection of spices?
But the spices allow it's different layers, within when you're tasting the food. So just as like when you start, you get the salty taste, the sweet notes, and by allowing different, the complexity of the spices, it blends and works with the dishes. Like in Caribbean food, I would say, like, because our food is a lot of is real fusion cookery, So you have from where we have the curry spices, then you have stuff like thyme and and other herbs that make up our cuisine, and it's just that blend.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and but getting the balance of those spices right is very critical, isn't it? Because you don't want to overly spice or have not overly spiced, but you obviously don't want to overspice it, but you don't want one particular spice dominating. It's about getting balance, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Right.
So I think with the balance, like in the Caribbean islands, you would find where, all right, the balance in Trinidad might be more kind of, there's a lot more Asian influence, and with with the curries and those like coriander, shadow benny that we use, herb, those kind of herbs. When you go to Jamaica, it's the jerk, that pimento, those kind of thyme, and those kind of spices. So with each island, there's a bit of complexity and slight differences in how they use the spices.
And the influences that, as you've mentioned as well, the influences from the past in terms of, as you've mentioned, with Trinidad, the heavy Asian influence from India, and you go through the other islands in French Caribbean, you'll have some influences there in terms of a more Creole style and so forth. So those influences exist. And Manny, in terms of you created a number of cocktails in your time. There must be that similarity in trying to create balance between the ingredients you use, just like you're trying to create balance with spices.
Well, yes. I mean, cooking and making drinks are very similar. And what you're trying to do is create textures and flavor pairings that kind of create a synergy, so they work together. So when you make a drink, you kind of create different flavor profiles that work together. And if they all work together in unison, then it creates a round and enjoyable drink. That's the key.
Right. And in terms of this recipe that we're looking at now, this Bermuda fish chowder, firstly, please somebody tell me what sherry peppers are. Does anybody?
No, I
never heard of a cherry pepper.
I don't know what peppers are.
Somebody Google it, please, and tell us.
The type of it from the sweet pepper family, sherry pepper in it.
It's a sweet pepper family, and okay, and I've had many a clam chowder in New England and up in the Boston area, and this is obviously not a clam chowder, but a fish chowder. Is there a particular? Does a chowder imply a style of soup, or is it just another name for soup? Can anybody? I mean, is it just is chowder another name for soup? It's not necessarily a cream.
Creamy kind of thick soup in it.
Right. So there is a little bit more creamy texture. And Manny,
there's different types of soup. Like there's broths. There's the chowder has a bit more texture.
Right.
Yeah.
And Manny, in terms of Gosling's Black Seal rum, has very butterscotch, vanilla, heavy caramel note, and it's quite robust.
It's interesting that they would pair that with fish, actually, because it's very robust. It's going to impart lots of flavor. It's got a very identifiable flavor profile, you know.
Right.
Can I just say something?
Well, obviously, I'm coming. I need you to say something.
Thank you. I'm looking, and they're using the fish head, yeah. And this is a very it's a very deep flavor in the head. It's different from the rest of the body when you're using the head. And with all the spices and the herbs and so, you would see that the Gosling will add some kind of like base to it, you know.
Right.
Because it's not a very fresh soup. If you're looking at it, you know, it's got tomato, all these deep flavors.
Yeah.
So the darker rum would be better than a white rum, because it's not, the fish head is a really, I mean, that's why Caribbean people love to make soup with fish head, because it has a completely different flavor from the body.
Right. That's a very, very good point in picking up, because you notice they put all fillets. So obviously that's the soup, particular Western markets, where maybe certain places you go, you're not going to exactly get the whole fish. You can go to the supermarket and pick up fillets much easier. And I think some people as well, I've had experiences where people get a little bit turned off by seeing a fish head in a bowl of in anything. So
yeah, I'm not. I chopped the head off, man. I don't put that in my plate.
No, Kelvin.
Yeah.
Kelvin, you make too much special fry.
I take it off and I put it aside. You know, I don't chew on the fish head now. It's none of my business.
It's none of your business.
The head, I'm telling you, moving to the Caribbean, and my gran used to use the head in soup, and I never liked the soup.
All right. So it does.
Sorry.
So let's, because we have a few recipes today, and let's talk about another soup recipe, and in a comparison here. And now what we have from Chef Irie, who is a Jamaican chef, who is a Jamaican television chef, well, an author, and I think he has also done some TV work. And he makes a pumpkin and coconut rum soup. And I can tell everybody that if you Google Chef Irie pumpkin coconut rum soup, you will see him making it on YouTube. So he, in case you're not sure whether I'm telling you the truth or not, but this is a recipe that he didn't quote the exact recipe, but I kind of watched the video and sort of picked up the sort of ingredients and the quantities he used. And it was quite interesting because